Learn English with simple yet effective English podcasts and practice with PDFs in each lesson.
Hello, and welcome back to the English Learning Podcast. I'm Jason, your host, and today we've got an exciting topic that will help you improve your English skills. But before we dive in, let me introduce my amazing co-host, Julia.
Hey, Jason. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for today's episode because we're going to talk about something that every English learner struggles with: remembering words.
Right. Have you ever learned a new word, felt confident about it, but then completely forgot it the next day?
Yes. And it can be so frustrating. You learn a word, you try to use it, but when you need it the most, it's just gone.
Exactly. But don't worry. Today, we're going to share powerful and fun techniques that will help you remember words easily and forever.
And trust me, these methods are simple, but super effective. Whether you're just starting out or you've been learning English for a while, you'll find these tips really helpful.
Absolutely. So grab a notebook, get comfortable, and let's learn how to remember words easily. All right. Before we talk about how to remember words, let's first understand why we forget them. Have you ever wondered why you can remember some words forever, but completely forget others?
Yes. And I think this is something every English learner experiences. You study a word, repeat it a few times, and the next day, it's like it never existed.
Exactly. Well, there's actually a scientific reason for that. It's called the forgetting curve.
Oh, I've heard about that. It's like when you learn something today, you might forget 50% of it by tomorrow if you don't review it.
Yes. And if you don't use the word at all after a few days or weeks, it's gone. Our brain naturally removes information that it thinks isn't important.
That makes sense. So, one big reason we forget words is that we don't review or use them enough.
Yes. And that's why learners should focus on understanding and using words instead of just memorizing them.
That's so true. I remember when I used to memorize words for school tests. I'd forget them right after the test because I never actually used them in real life. Also, I think another reason we forget words is that we don't practice speaking enough. If we don't say the words out loud, they don't really become a part of our active vocabulary.
Absolutely. It's like learning to ride a bike. If you only read about how to ride a bike but never actually try it, you won't remember how to do it when you need to.
Exactly. So to sum it up, we forget words because we don't review them enough. We memorize without context. We don't use them in speaking or writing.
Perfect summary. But don't worry. Coming up next, we'll share some powerful techniques to help you remember words easily and make them stick in your brain forever. Now that we know why we forget words, let's talk about one of the best ways to remember them: association. Julia, have you ever used association techniques to learn new words?
Yes, and it really works. Instead of just memorizing words, I try to connect them to things I already know. That way they stick in my memory much longer.
That's exactly what association is about. Our brain loves connections. When we link new words to images, sounds, or personal experiences, they become much easier to remember.
That makes sense. Let's give some examples. Imagine you're learning the word apple. Instead of just repeating apple, apple, apple over and over, you can picture a big red apple in your mind. Maybe even imagine eating one.
Yes, and you can make it even stronger by associating it with something personal. For example, if your grandmother used to make apple pie, you can connect the word apple with the smell of that pie. The stronger the association, the better your memory.
I love that. And another great trick is using mnemonics. Let's say you're trying to remember the word gigantic, which means very big. You can imagine a giant holding a big sign that says gigantic on it.
A great example. You're creating a funny or unusual picture in your mind, which makes the word more memorable. The crazier the association, the easier it is to remember.
And this works for difficult words too. For example, let's take the word procrastinate, which means to delay or avoid doing something. You can imagine a person sitting on a couch watching TV and saying, "I'll do my work later." That's procrastination.
Exactly. And here's another powerful technique: word linking. This means connecting a new English word to a word from your native language that sounds similar.
Oh, I love that. Like if the word fantastic sounds like a word in your language, you can use that connection to help you remember it.
Yes. And you can even create stories to connect words. Let's say you need to remember 3 new words: sun, beach, and relax. You can imagine a story. I'm sitting on the beach, feeling the warm sun, and I'm so relaxed.
That's brilliant. This way, the words stay connected in your mind. The brain remembers stories much better than random words, so learners can create funny, weird, or even emotional stories to help them remember new vocabulary.
Exactly. So, to summarize, here are some great ways to use association to remember words easily. Use images. Picture the word in your mind. Make it personal. Connect it to your own life. Use mnemonics. Create funny or weird connections. Try word linking. Connect it to a word in your native language. Create a story. Link words together in a short story.
That's a fantastic list. If you try even one of these methods, you'll remember words much faster.
Absolutely. And now that we've talked about association, let's move on to another powerful technique: spaced repetition and active recall. These methods will help you make words stay in your long-term memory forever. Julia, have you ever noticed that if you don't review a word, you forget it after a few days?
Yes, and it's so frustrating. I used to learn new words, but if I didn't practice them, they just disappeared from my memory.
That happens to everyone. And that's because our brain naturally forgets things over time. But the good news is, spaced repetition helps us remember words permanently.
That sounds interesting. So how does spaced repetition work?
Great question. Instead of reviewing a word many times in one day, you review it over a longer period of time. For example, if you learn a new word today, you review it. Tomorrow, after 1 day. After 3 days, after 1 week, after 1 month. Each time you review, you strengthen your memory. And soon, you'll never forget that word.
That's amazing. So instead of cramming words all at once, we should review them over time. Instead of just looking at a list of words, I can cover the meaning and try to remember it myself.
Yes, testing yourself forces your brain to work, which makes the memory stronger. Here are some easy ways to use active recall. Flashcards. Write the word on one side and the meaning on the other. Try to remember it before flipping the card. Quizzes. Test yourself with small vocabulary quizzes. Writing practice. Try using the word in a sentence from memory. Speaking practice. Challenge yourself to use the new word in conversation.
That's awesome. So instead of just reading words, we should actively test ourselves. That way the words stay in our brain for a long time.
Exactly. If you combine spaced repetition and active recall, you'll remember words permanently.
That's so helpful. So to summarize, review words at spaced intervals. Don't try to learn too many words at once. Use active recall. Test yourself instead of just reading. Use different methods: flashcards, quizzes, writing, and speaking.
Perfect summary. And now that we've talked about memory techniques, let's move on to a fun way to remember words. Learning through context. Julia, do you think learning words is enough?
Not at all. If you don't use the words, you'll forget them. That's why practicing in real life is so important.
Exactly. Learning words is just the first step. But to truly remember them, You need to use them in your daily life. So let's talk about some simple ways learners can do that. One great way is to talk to yourself in English. For example, if you're making tea, you can say, I am making tea. The water is boiling. I will add some sugar. It helps you use words naturally.
That's a great idea. Another trick is labeling objects around you. If you're learning the word mirror, put a small note on your mirror with the word. That way, every time you see it, you'll remember the word. Another great tip is writing short daily notes in English. You can write about what you did today, what you ate, or how you feel. It doesn't have to be perfect, just use new words.
Yes, and don't forget about texting in English. If you have a friend who's also learning, try texting in English instead of your native language. Even small messages can help.
That's a fun way to practice. And what about social media? You can follow English pages, comment on posts, and even try writing captions in English.
Absolutely. Every small action helps. So, to summarize, here are simple ways to use words in daily life. Talk to yourself in English. Label objects around you. Write daily notes or a journal. Text in English with a friend. Engage on social media in English.
That's a great list. The more we use new words, the easier they become a natural part of our vocabulary.
Exactly. And now, let's talk about another amazing method. Learning with real-life content like books, movies, and music. Julia, how important do you think these skills are for vocabulary learning?
They're super important. I've noticed that when I hear a word many times in conversations, movies, or podcasts, I remember it naturally, even without studying it.
Exactly. Listening helps your brain recognize words in real situations. And when you hear them often, they stick in your memory. That's why listening too. English every day is such a powerful way to learn.
So what's the best way to improve listening and remember more words?
One simple way is listening to English podcasts, just like this one. You can listen while commuting, exercising, or even cooking. And it's okay if you don't understand everything. Your brain is still absorbing the sounds and words.
That's a great point. And for speaking, I think the best way is just to start talking, even if it's not perfect.
Yes, many learners hesitate because they're afraid of making mistakes. But speaking is like muscle training. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
One great technique is shadowing, listening to a sentence and repeating it immediately.
Oh, I love shadowing. It helps with pronunciation and memorizing words at the same time. Here are some easy ways to practice listening and speaking. Listen to English. Every day, podcasts, audiobooks, or news. Use shadowing. Repeat after native speakers. Talk to yourself. Describe what you're doing. Find a speaking partner, a friend, tutor, or language exchange.
That's a great list. So listening helps us remember words naturally, and speaking strengthens them in our memory.
Exactly. And now, let's talk about one more powerful technique. Learning with emotions and storytelling. Julia, do you think learning new words should feel like a boring school lesson?
Absolutely not. Learning should be fun. When we enjoy something, we remember it better, right?
Exactly. When we have fun, our brain is more engaged, and words stick in our memory much faster. So let's share some fun and creative methods to learn and remember new words.
Oh, I love this. One of my favorite methods is learning with songs. If I hear a new word in a song, I remember it easily because of the rhythm and melody.
That's a fantastic method. Songs repeat words, and music helps us feel the language. Plus, singing along improves pronunciation, too.
And what about word games? Games like Scrabble, crossword puzzles, or even mobile apps make learning fun.
Great idea. Playing games challenges your brain and keeps you engaged.
Another fun method is acting out words, also known as TPR, total physical response.
Oh, like using hand movements or facial expressions while saying words. That really helps.
Yes. For example, if you're learning the word jump, don't just say it. Actually, jump. Your brain connects the action to the word, making it easier to remember.
That's so cool. Another fun trick is creating silly stories using new words. The crazier the story, the better we remember the words.
Exactly. Stories create strong mental images, which helps words stay in your memory. So let's summarize some fun and creative ways to learn words. Learn with songs. Listen and sing along. Play word games, Scrabble, crosswords, or apps. Act out words. Use movements and expressions. Create silly stories. The funnier, the better. Wow. Learning vocabulary doesn't have to be difficult. It can actually be exciting.
Exactly. And now, let's move on to our final section, how to stay consistent and keep improving.
Great idea. So, we started by talking about why people forget words. The key reason is lack of practice and not using words enough in daily life.
Wow, we've covered so many great strategies today. Before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap and share some final tips for remembering words easily. We explored different techniques to make learning easier, like associating words with images and stories, using spaced repetition and active recall, practicing speaking and listening.
Yes. We also talked about fun and creative methods like learning with songs, playing word games, acting out words, making silly stories.
Learning should be fun.
Absolutely. And the most important tip? Stay consistent. Even just 5 to 10 minutes of practice every day will help you build a strong vocabulary over time.
So, to all our listeners, keep practicing, stay motivated, and most importantly, enjoy the journey of learning English.
Yes. And if you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and share it with a friend who's also learning English.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.